Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. In the age of Trump, winning is all that matters. The phrase "by any means necessary" has truly been weaponized. Now politics has little to do with policy. Front and center are perceived cultural grievances and resentments. Just ask Brett Kavanaugh. Cross-talking the politics of grievance, I'm joined by my guest, Nate Lerner in New York. He is executive director of Build the Wave. In Purcellville, we have Ned Ryan. He is founder and CEO of American Majority. And in Auburn, we cross to Jeff Deist. He is president of Mises Institute. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Jeff, let me go to you first in Auburn. I really wanted to talk about the politics of resentment and grievance in very broad terms. And then we had the case with the Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh kind of blow up, and it's going to probably obsess us for the next week. And then for former Vice President Joe Biden, he has this comment: Trump supporters are the dregs of society. I thought we got over the deplorable mistake here. It seems to be repetitive, and it does seem to be focused on this politics of grievance and resentment. How do you put it all together? Go ahead, Jeff, in Auburn.
I think the Kavanaugh hearings are the latest flashpoint. I was a little surprised to hear Biden say that. He actually said some conciliatory things back when he was on the Senate Judiciary Committee way back in the Clarence Thomas nomination days. So this is perhaps Biden thinking about running for president. Who knows? But the deplorable stuff, look, both sides think this largely about the other. Both sides imagine that maybe 30–40% of the country is beyond redemption. And I don't know how you deal with that politically. Neither side has much of a theory about how you deal with politically vanquished people. They don't just go away. And what bothers me about all of this is that everything's become so politicized that we imagine every aspect of our life has to be viewed through this lens. And I think the Kavanaugh hearing reflects it. I think this is a pretty milquetoast guy, a pretty down-the-middle guy in terms of a Republican nominee for the Supreme Court. I think that is part of the spoils system. Trump basically gets to have his nominees absent something really terrible. Was he involved in some kind of sexual misconduct? I don't know. That's a factual question. But the point is that, what Kavanaugh did or didn't do is almost beside the point. This is a war, and they don't want Trump to have a victory. And Trump doesn't want Democrats to have a victory by killing his nomination. That's what's really going on here. It's a proxy war.
Okay, Nate, in New York, weigh in on what we just heard from Jeff here, because, he used the term a vanquished people, and I think that's what a lot of people feel that voted for Donald Trump. They feel that they've been vanquished by a political system that doesn't listen to them. And then we have, watching MSNBC, I think it was Katie Tur, she said, "I can't believe the rank and file of the Republican Party still supports him." Her whole message there told me she doesn't understand half the country. Go ahead, Nate, in New York.
Well, a few things to touch on there. I mean, Republicans at this point no longer make up half the country, not that they ever did, but they are shrinking in numbers every day. Okay, they're losing
I'm talking
more and
about
more registered voters, more voting for independent, more becoming Democrats.
Roughly half the population that can vote voted for him.
A third of the country. I would say it's closer to a third. And, they're not vanquished. Their voice was very loudly heard during the election. In fact, it was overheard. They were overrepresented thanks to the Electoral College. The way our Senate works as well, rural states are overrepresented in the Senate. Conservatives are a minority right now in our country, and yet they have a much louder voice because of the way our electoral system is set up right now. And also, just to jump back on Kavanaugh real fast, this was a political issue previously when we were talking about Roe v. Wade, but now when we turn our attention to the allegations at hand, it's really become more of a moral issue right now, because it's very clear that his accuser is telling the truth. She has absolutely nothing to gain from this and so much to lose.
How do we know that?
She's never sought the spotlight before.
How do we know that? How do we know that? It will never be proven.
Why would she lie about this?
It'll be never proven one way or another. Okay, Ned, you want to jump in there? Go ahead. Ned, go ahead. I knew it was going to happen.
But if he's so milquetoast, why not just put another conservative in?
No.
Go ahead, Nate.
No, that's absurd. You know what? Elections have consequences, and the duly elected president of the United States, according to our Constitution,
then let's wait for the midterms then and see what happens.
His appointees. Brett Kavanaugh is definitely within the well stream, well respected, over 300 decisions on the lower court that have been out there. People understand where he's coming from. Again, elections have consequences. There's so much to address here, but I'm going to start with this. First of all, I think what's deeply troubling about this in our society, but even now in our legal system, we used to operate under the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. Now we're just saying from an uncorroborated 35-year-ago accusation from somebody that can't even remember the day or the location of where it happened, we're going to presume that she is actually right and that Kavanaugh is guilty. I think this is extremely dangerous, where now we're saying people are guilty until you can prove your innocence on a very vague charge from decades ago. So no, I think this is completely wrong, but it also addresses a much larger issue in our society in which we need to go back to presumption of innocence until proven guilty. The other thing that I think people are completely missing is this. Forget conservative, forget Republican. What people are not understanding and are missing about the whole Donald Trump phenomenon is that people who have been rejected by the system of government, who are considered outsiders, are sick of the bipartisan globalism that has sold out their interests, from bad trade deals, from trying to do nation building and spending trillions of dollars overseas, for sending our manufacturing jobs overseas. And so I think people need to shift their mindset from Republican versus Democrat to more of a ruling class versus the outsider, because I think that everything starts to make a lot more sense when you look through those lenses.
Okay, Ned, do you want to jump in there? Go ahead, because I want to be fair to you.
I do, actually, and you know what?
Hang on, no, let me go to Nate. Let me go to Nate.
I voted for him over 16 other Republicans.
Let me go to Nate here in New York, because I want to be fair to him. Go ahead.
I think I agree. Our political system has become extremely divisive. But if you look at who is the most divisive political figure in history right now, it's Donald Trump. Democrats never responded this way to John McCain. They never responded this way to Mitt Romney or even Paul Ryan. It's Donald Trump who's brought this out in them because they are scared of what he's doing to our country. They're scared of his extremism. And I would love a moderate Republican in office right now, but we are very, very far from that. He is the most divisive figure in history. Right, if you want to bring the country together, put someone more moderate in office.
Let me go to Jeff here. Okay, it's been said, Donald Trump is an extremist. Is he an extremist? If you look at his policies, it's pretty mainstream Republican. Now, his style is very different. And that's what I'm getting at here, okay? Because Trump supporters apparently smell, okay? They're deplorables. This has come from the left. It's not come from the right here. It's all about style and not about policy. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, it is about tone and style, no question. I don't think Hillary Clinton would necessarily be doing radically different things from a policy perspective that Donald Trump's doing now. She'd probably be doing them in a more rote fashion. But I'd just like to get back to this point. Why would this woman do this against Kavanaugh? Well, I think she would do it to be a resistance hero and to take a political scalp. That's what this is about. And frankly, I think that deciding everything by politics is a pretty bad way to organize society. I think the Supreme Court's way too powerful. It's become this winner-take-all system of ours. And why should we have to wake up in the morning and care so much about the identity of one of 9 super legislative monarchs on the Supreme Court? This isn't what the Constitution imagined, and this isn't how it ought to operate. So this is all, from my perspective, as someone who wants government radically downsized, this is all a symptom of a Supreme Court and a federal government which is wildly extra-constitutional and operating beyond how it ought to operate. Kavanaugh's not really the issue here, and his morality is hardly something to be judged by the Senate Judiciary Committee of all things.
Okay, let me go back to Nate in New York. I mean, you mentioned something, you talked about the Electoral College. I mean, now this is an issue because I suppose your candidate lost here, but that's the way the system works. You shoot for 270 and you become president, okay? If it had been reversed, no one would be talking about the Electoral College. At least I doubt that. And on top of that, these hearings with Kavanaugh, traditionally, they're just about, is the person competent to do the job? And watching those hearings, that had nothing to do with his competence. It was looking to ambush him and to destroy his character. And, I think he's like milquetoast, too. I mean, he's a really solid guy. Go ahead in New York.
So what I don't understand is if he's so milquetoast and if he's such a generic conservative, then why not just put Merrick Garland in or another conservative? It's very clear. Kavanaugh actually was very unimpressive also in answering a lot of the questions earlier. And then the way he's handled these allegations has been very disturbing. And you know what? When you're appointing someone to the highest court in the land, character absolutely does matter. Trump may be president, but character still matters. And so do morals, and so does law and order. And so does the rule of law. And so it's absolutely unacceptable that when someone comes forward and puts these allegations forward, which are very likely correct, that we still put someone like this on the Supreme Court. Why not just put another conservative in? And the reason is because Senate Republicans want to make sure they get someone in before the midterms because they know they're likely going to lose the Senate potentially.
Okay, well, that is the prerogative of the President of the United States, okay? It's his prerogative to do that. It's not others to decide that there. You know, again, I mean, I have to say that I'm
what about with Obama and Merrick Garland,
I'm very distressed by this lack of presumption of innocence. It's extraordinary. I'll give you the last minute in Percival before we go to the break.
Right.
Go ahead.
He's not going to jail. He just can't be on the Supreme Court.
No, and I think the thing and the whole reason that this is such a big issue is because, as Jeff made that point, the Supreme Court is far outside of what the founders originally envisioned the court being. It has become a super legislative body, which is the left's favorite plaything for expanding the administrative state and doing an end run around the legislative process. And I'll tell you why it's so important, because I think someone like Brett Kavanaugh going on to the Supreme Court is actually about a restoration to constitutional order and saying the Supreme Court shouldn't have this role in our society. In fact, we shouldn't know all 9 names of the Supreme Court justices. They should be more in the background. But I'm going to say this yet again. I think the left has still struggled and has struggled for decades with actually rationally accepting losing an election because they don't like the results of it. You know what? That's how our constitutional republic works. That's how democracy works. You lose elections. If you don't like the results, you try to win the next election. You don't come up with bizarre fairy tale hoax stories of Trump-Russia collusion. You don't come up with these false stories against Brett Kavanaugh, which, by the way, Dianne Feinstein was sitting on for weeks. Didn't bring it up in private conversations.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in here. We're going to go to a break, and remember, elections have consequences. Who said that? After a short break, we'll continue our discussion on the politics of division. Stay with our team. Okay, I want to go back to Jeff and Auburn. I want to pick up on a point that Ned brought up here. I mean, if you look at the legislative victories, or policy victories, I should rather say, of the left over the last 40, 45, even 50 years, the epicenter is the Supreme Court. And I think this is one of the reasons why at this 11th hour revelation that can never be proven one way or another. As far as I know, there was never a police report. Kavanaugh has been interrogated, questioned by the FBI 6 times. I mean, how many people go through that in life, okay? This is an 11th hour, and it's politics, okay? And it's a blood sport, okay? But it seems not transparent in this attempt to derail this nomination. And it's only because it's Trump's nomination. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it is blood sport, and that's because in many ways a Supreme Court justice is more important and more powerful than a president.
Yeah.
They certainly have a much longer term. And I think what's going on here is that people understand that this court is going to make macro decisions for American society. The decisions on things like abortion, on guns, on health care mandates, all kinds of things, on zoning, you name it, on eminent domain, on civil asset forfeiture, on criminal justice. So what we have, again, is some sort of super legislature, and deciding things in a top-down manner for 320 million people, especially 320 million people who are increasingly diverse, pluralistic, is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for miscontent in this country. I hate it. I hate the idea that the Supreme Court makes these decisions. I think San Francisco perhaps needs a different set of social rules than rural Montana for how it organizes its society. And the history of the Supreme Court in the 20th century is saying, no, 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 we're going to have one rule for how we organize society, and we're going to be the ultimate arbiter of it, not Congress, not the executive branch. And this is the problem. I don't know how you undo this. I wish I could give you an easy answer, but when we hear things about like, well, the Electoral College overrepresents rural. This is absurd. If Hillary Clinton had got maybe 100,000 more votes, 200,000 more votes in Florida, in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and had won the Electoral College and won the election, all of a sudden the left would be telling us about the wisdom of our system prevented a demagogue from like Donald Trump getting in after all. I mean, literally, 320 million people were letting a couple 100,000 swing the balance between this mass hysteria of the Hitler's in office versus, clearly the arc of progressivism is moving in the right direction because of Hillary Clinton. We're gonna have the national mindset swung to these 2 degrees by a couple 100,000 people. It's absurd. So count me out.
Okay, Ned, let me go back to you in New York. In the questions that I sent out through my producers, I mentioned the whole saga around Bill Clinton and his impeachment process, and there was a backlash against that, against how I wasn't for going after Clinton on that. Other things I think policy-wise fine, but there was a backlash, and I tend to think, going back to that poll that I mentioned that MSNBC, how can Trump supporters, after everything that's been said and done, still support him? It seems to me that the Democrats don't understand Trump people and Trump country. And I think, isn't it incumbent upon you to try to understand them more? I mean, politics used to be the art of the possible, and I don't see that. I mean, there's so many things. Kavanaugh's testimony when he was talking about some kind of abortion procedure was intentionally tampered with the tape, and it was put out. He said this. No, he was quoting somebody else. I mean, that's kind of warfare that's below the belt, don't you think? Go ahead in New York.
It is, but so is the way that Merrick Garland and Obama were treated, just 2 years ago. And I think it's important to remember that Senate Republicans did the exact same thing.
Fair.
So this is really no different. And I think, and we're seeing too much of it from both sides. And you are right. We should make more of an effort to engage with Trump supporters. I think there is a little bit, too much hatred on both sides politically. We're still all Americans. We still live in the same nation. We still have the same goals, and we need to keep that in mind more often. But at the same time, when you look at what's happening in the White House, you look at the chaos, you look at how many times Trump's own people have been quoted calling him an idiot. It's a little concerning to hear that. And when you see all the turnover, all the endless disaster, every day in the news, there's new notifications about the nonsense going on in the Trump administration. You look at it and you say objectively, even if you agree with this man ideologically, how can you stand by him as a leader? How can you stand by him as an executive, knowing all you know about him that's just coming out every single day?
He was elected.
And so how do you stand by that, though? If I had put someone in office like that, I would have changed my vote immediately.
Hang on, you guys. On this program, when I call balls and strikes, when he says something or does something I think is wrong, I say it loud and clear, without any doubt, okay? I don't carry water for anyone, okay? But I'm not going to be default against him, okay? I'm not default for him, all right? I listen, parse his words, parse his ideas. Let me go to Percival here. I mean, everyone in his administration calls him an idiot. Well, do you trust Bob Woodward? I'm not sure necessarily that's true. All these other books that come out,
he has tapes.
It seems to me that it's a coordinated campaign. This anonymous op-ed to the New York.
We're not that good. The Democrats are not good enough to pull that off. Trust me.
It's all a concerted because they can't fight him any other way. They just fight him personally. And there's a lot of people that like him personally. Okay, you're insulting them as well. Go ahead and Percival.
That's exactly right, because we went out in a very intentional way. I was supporting him before the primary was over, and the reason I did it is because we needed somebody like Donald Trump to come in and mix stuff up. And I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed because he is kind of snapping back to more of a conservative Republican administration. But I want him to, I'm encouraged by some of the things he's already done, cutting the regulatory state, the tax cuts, pushing through the Keystone Pipeline, going and saying we're not going to put up with these bad trade deals, going and saying to China, you know what, we're not going to tolerate these bad trade deals and you stealing our technology with forced technology transfers and outright theft. I mean, all of these things that he's doing, and then obviously Supreme Court justices like Kavanaugh, that's exactly why we elected him. We wanted him to go out and do these things and put us on a different path and say, we're not going to have status quo. It's not going to be business as usual. We had plenty of choices in that Republican primary, and we chose Donald Trump, and we chose him for a reason. And the other thing I'll say about this, because I've been inside this White House, I've been inside this West Wing multiple times. First of all, everybody, I think, understands every administration, especially a West Wing, is full of type A personalities on steroids who think they're the smartest person in that room. So there's always that conflict. But I've been in there, Peter, and I'm telling you, of course there's conflict. Of course there's differences of opinions. But nobody's running around with their hair on fire. Of course. You know, the other thing I think that throws people off, he does have a different approach. He has brought an outside approach, and it's still throwing people for a loop.
Okay, well, this man puts a lot of people's hair on fire. No one can deny that. I think we all agree on that, okay? Okay, Jeff, you know, in looking at the media coverage of the president, it's just, particularly from the liberal cable station, CNN, MSNBC, for me, it's just hour after hour of virtue signaling. You don't learn any news, and you learn about opinions about people that, well, I personally have almost zero respect for. It's the politics of virtue signaling, and that doesn't get us anywhere because there's no debate. There's no debate about policy that way. Go ahead, and Jeff and Albert.
You know, if you could go back a few years toward the end of Obama's term and say, look, Democrats, the next president's going to be Republican. But I have some good news for you. He's not going to be some red state governor. He's going to be a New York City real estate developer with a bunch of beautiful wives who's worked all his life around gay and lesbian folks, all his life around black folks, isn't animated by social conservatism, abortion, any of these issues. And by the way, he's also a trade protectionist who's pro-union. I think you would have taken that. You would have preferred to have Hillary, but if you had to have a Republican, I think you would have taken that. And I'll tell you what, I bet you all three of us can agree. If he would just get out, pick one, get out of Yemen, get out of Syria, get out of Iraq or Afghanistan, just one of those four, I bet you all three of your guests would agree that would be a good thing.
Jeff, are you going to be the chairman of the Trump 2020 campaign? Because I think you did a really good audition right there. That was an excellent audition there. Okay, let me go back to New York. Let's stay with the issue of the virtue signaling. I mean, does it give the Democrats any kind of traction by hour after hour, week after week, month after month of just bashing the president? He takes 2 scoops of ice cream and everyone else has 1. What value is that? What is the value of talking like that about his golf game and all? I don't understand it. Maybe I've been gone too long. Go ahead in New York.
I mean, it's the same reason he won. He is such a character. He just demands attention constantly. And every single day, you know, every time I look at my phone and I see a news alert, I'm like, oh no, what's happened now?
Oh, I do that too.
It's not that it's nothing. It's that something significant has happened. Yeah, and it's kind of scary. You know, you have to wonder. And it's a little tiring to have someone like that who's so unreliable in office. And what's really concerning, though, is what happens when a real disaster occurs, you know, here or abroad, and we have this man in office who is not fit to handle it appropriately. And I think we do need to get back to focusing on the issues, talking about policy. And luckily, if you go to a lot of these different districts across the country, there is a very exciting number of diverse and experienced Democrats who are running for office, who are talking about local issues that people care about, who aren't talking about Trump at all. They're reaching across the aisle to Trump supporters. They're talking to moderates. They're talking to Democrats. And they're talking about, you know, helping people get health care. They're talking about addressing economic inequality. They're helping, you know, talking about issues that people care about day to day.
Okay.
And so, you know, the media may focus on Trump.
I guess I don't watch enough CNN and MSNBC because I never talk about those things, ever. Let me go back to Percival. You know, for all the people, and I'm not a Trump supporter, I'm not for him, I'm not against him, I go policy by policy here. But the constantly denigrating him, we have to remember one thing. He did get elected. The longest shot victory probably in American presidential politics. Last word goes to Percival. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I think they've done a great disservice. Listen, I want a free press. I also want an honest press. And I think they decided as soon as Trump came into office, they were going to be the opposition party, and they were going to leave behind a lot of norms and a lot of standards that they had operated under for the previous however many decades. And so I think they've done themselves, a great disservice. And you can see this in the polls, Peter, when they in the mid-70s had a 72% a trustworthiness approval rating from the American people that dropped to 32% in 2016. They've done this to themselves, and they've done it to themselves because it looks like they've lost all objectivity. They've lost all standards. They've just decided they're going to be the opposition party, and they're going to do whatever it takes to constantly attack and maybe even try and bring down this president. And the American people are rising up to it and saying, we're not going to have this anymore.
I got to jump in here. All I can say is to be continued. Many thanks to my guests in New York, Albert, and Percival. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, CrossTalk rules.